We want to bring in Michael Allen. He served on the President Bush's National Security Council, and David Tafuri, former foreign policy advisor to the Obama campaign. And of course, Marie and Jason will stay with us. David, if I could go to you, because of your State Department experience, can you just walk us a little bit behind the scenes? Because Sherelle, Brittney Griner's wife, thanked a lot of people. And I'm sure there were more names that she would have gotten to if she had the time. But she said that there were so many people behind the scenes. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to have one of these negotiations behind the scenes at the State Department.
This was a really tough negotiation because of what's going on more broadly between the U.S. and Russia. And it's a negotiation that the State Department needed to accomplish because it's a distraction from the main priorities of the U.S. with respect to Russia, which is to support Ukraine and repel the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And Russia and Putin were using Brittney Griner as leverage, which is very unfortunate for her and for her family. It was a show trial, as the administration called it. There was no basis for her to be given the length of the sentence that she was given in Russia. But because of the situation and the tension between the U.S. and Russia, the negotiations were much more difficult than they normally are. The U.S. had, and State Department had basically identified Brittney Griner as wrongly detained by Russia. And so that's why they drove so hard to get her released. And so it's a big success, not just for Brittney Griner and for her family, but also for U.S. policy towards Russia and for support for Ukraine.
Let's come back to that whole phrase about a big success in a moment here. But first, Michael Allen, welcome to the conversation. At first glance, your reaction now to the news that's not even an hour old.
Well, of course, it's terrific for Brittney Griner's family here in the Christmas season to be able to have her home, but it's bittersweet not to have Paul Whalen coming home as well. I really wonder over time whether media inquiries will uncover that the Biden administration prioritized Brittney Griner over the Whalen family. It has me a little bit worried about whether there's enough momentum to carry forward to try and get Paul Whalen home. And the other question for me is, who is it that the Russians want to swap for Paul Whalen, if they do at all? There are a variety of dissidents around the globe who have been honestly attacked and in some cases murdered by the Russian regime, and there have been arrests, especially in Germany. I'm thinking of one there. And I wonder if the Russians are trying to get some of their people released from other prisons around the world in exchange for Paul Whalen or others that are wrongfully detained in Russia.
Fair questions there. David, back to you on this, quote, big success. The White House had to know they would come under pressure and likely public criticism because two people are not coming back. And based on all the reporting we've had over the past year, that was their intent all along. And that did not happen, David.
Yeah, from all accounts, they wanted, a 2-for-1 deal where they would get Whalen and Griner in exchange for Viktor Bout. And Russia just simply insisted they would not agree. And that's why I think it took so long to get this deal done, because we were hearing rumors that the Griner deal was on the verge of being completed months ago. Whalen is accused of espionage in Russia. That is also likely a trumped-up charge. It does not appear to be any evidence that he actually engaged in espionage. So this was a political prosecution by Russia, again, to get leverage. But what he is accused of is a much more serious crime than Brittney Griner, which probably made it more complicated for the U.S. to do a deal for him. But I take the Biden administration at their word that they're going to continue to strive for his release as well, and there likely will be a subsequent prisoner exchange.
I get the point you're making, but if it's a bad deal, why do a deal at all? Dana?
Well, I think one of the things is that, as Marie was saying, she was there at the State Department when Bout was convicted. This was a big success under the Obama administration. In fact, the DOJ press release at the time said Bout was convicted of conspiring to kill U.S. nationals, conspiring to kill U.S. officers and employees, conspiring to acquire and use anti-aircraft missiles, and conspiring to provide material support to foreign terrorist organizations. So I think that is obviously, that's one of the things that you mentioned, Marie, about perhaps when he goes back to Russia, he's not able to do all of those things again, and maybe there are other bad guys in the world that's there. Marie, though, do you know what it's like for somebody who has been in a situation like this, like where Brittney Griner has been held unjustifiably, and we don't know what exactly the conditions were, but we can imagine that they weren't great. So when they transition back to the United States, are you familiar with the process of trying to get them back to sort of their normal lives?
Yeah, Dana, it's heartbreaking. We dealt with this with Jason Rezaian and some of the hostages that had been held by Iran when we got them released. And this is a process. You heard President Biden speak about it today. We don't know the exact conditions she's been held in, but we know that they're bad. We know she's been exposed to trauma, and she will have a process of healing. She will, her family will. And, there'll be a lot of people who want to hear from her, who want to hear her story. We heard from Trevor Reed pretty soon after he came back. But this has been a traumatic experience for her and for her family, and it's going to take some time. Give her some space and grace to rejoin her family, to rejoin American society. But I loved what her wife said this morning, Dana, when she said, we're going to use our voice to keep fighting for Paul Whalen and the others that are still detained, because this advocacy by this family and by Black women, by sports, by athletes, by sports leaders, that I think is what helped keep her story in the news. And so as she comes home and readjusts to life, I love that her family is going to keep fighting for other detained Americans while they're going through this really tough process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and on that, here is the comment from Brittney Griner's wife at the White House just last hour.
Today, my family is whole, but as you all are aware, there's so many other families who are not whole. And so BG's not here to say this, but I will gladly speak on her behalf and say that BG and I will remain committed to the work of getting every American home, including Paul, whose family is in our hearts today.
We hear that comment loud and clear. Michael Allen, you were just talking about Putin's motivations, his intentions, the incentive he has for taking Americans essentially captive, because that's what we've seen with both of these Americans now. Paul Whalen's in a military prison. He was in a military hospital, transferred there over Thanksgiving. Based on a quick search here, it looks like he spoke to his family about a week ago. He said he was in good spirits. He said he was doing well, but how do you know on the other end?
That's definitely the case. Putin is, of course, cold-blooded and brutally transactional. There's no doubt that he'll come back at us with some large ask, in some ways trying to free others around the globe that for now seem like a bridge too far for the United States and our allies. But I think that's, Biden said he's the president. He's got to make the hard calls. I think he'll definitely be trying to get Paul Whalen home. But, you're right. We've set an example of it pays to, unfortunately, kidnap or jail American citizens worldwide if the United States government is going to deal and otherwise swap hostages and prisoners with you. So I'm glad the president also said, read the warnings about which countries you're going to around the world and be very careful about where you're going. I wouldn't go to Russia if I were many American citizens today.
Jason Chaffetz, could you talk about that as well?
Yeah, listen, the threat is very real. Vladimir Putin is more than a thug. He's a dictator. He's every negative thing you can possibly think of. Look, I'm just happy an American's coming home. I think she would have died in that custody. I think she lost 9 months of her life. And like I said, it's a very, very high price to pay. And I do hope that the Greiner will use her celebrity to continue to pound on Whalen, because the squeaky wheel does get the grease. And there are things happening around the globe. There could be other negotiators out there, other prisoners in other countries that are high-value targets for Putin to bring home. So I think there's a way to do this if the will continues to be there.
David, this whole idea about setting an example that Michael Allen was referring to right there. When you think about the Taliban 5 swap for Bo Bergdahl, do you kind of lay the foundation for other world leaders to take note of that and learn from it?
Unfortunately, repressive regimes have been doing this for a long time. This is something that Iran does. It's obviously something that the Taliban did. This is something that Russia does right now. There's a long history of this. The U.S. is in a very difficult circumstance. We want to bring our citizens home. They deserve to come home when they're charged and sentenced in ways that don't follow the rule of law. Notably, the U.S. didn't change any foreign policy. I'm sure Russia would have liked to trade Brittney Griner for the U.S. not supporting Ukraine anymore, or something much more significant than that. The U.S. didn't do any of those things. This is within the realm of what countries do, which is exchange prisoners for other prisoners. It's not good. You don't feel good about it. Viktor Bout was a really bad man. He was sentenced to 25 years. He deserved to serve every year of that 25-year sentence. But notably, he did serve more than half of that sentence, and he's going home only because Brittney Griner didn't deserve to be in a prison.
Michael Allen, can I just ask you one question? This is just something that I wondered about, and I know you well enough that I can throw this at you and you can tell me that I'm crazy or whatever. President Zelensky this morning, thinking about the leverage that we don't have now with Viktor Bout. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it shows Zelensky, again, that Putin can negotiate when he feels like we're dealing with leverage, when he's dealing with leverage and power. We had somebody that Putin really, really wanted. He took someone in order to swap. I think it has other lessons that we'll be able to learn over time about when we get into negotiations. We, the royal we, thinking of Ukraine and the rest, when they get into negotiations with the Russians, I think Zelensky knows he has to have serious leverage in order to get anywhere with Vladimir Putin in a negotiation. And that has repercussions about how much territory he's going to want to take in the upcoming spring offensive in Ukraine.
Michael, thank you. Marie, thanks. Jason, David, thank you for joining our conversation today.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.